Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. I would like to get into it. The title is Equality Realms and Inequality in the outer realms. And so I want to speak about something very crucial, a crucial distinction I noticed in a sort of self-inquiry that I went through. I just pretty much had a moment where my inner realms were moving more than my outer realms, and I noticed something. And so what it is that we human beings look at the cosmic landscape and we divide it between the macrocosm and macrocosmic forces, or those celestial the celestial condition we find ourselves in. You know, the planet, and how even if you believed in God, you'd be like, why does God like spheres? And so the idea kind of comes that it's like this landscape, and we see a very macro view of it, and we see a micro view. And I noticed that the macro and the micro, the way we developed behind our eyes, all those various kind of classifications of subjective outline, they exist equally. So behind your eye, every human being has their own eyes. And how the eyes walk behind the face is a totally different circumstance. Behind your eyes, you find by your ability to project. It's actually effort that translates into subtler movement where the person thinks they're moving. Just a second, guys. I'm fixing something here. Okay. I find that every human being has access to a chunk of they are being. Because we're a creature that has formulated itself into a sense of self, and the sense of self kind of is codependent with the sense of the world. That means your sense of world doesn't arise if there's no self. They find themselves, I find, of course, I find that there's a dissonance. There's a set of the realms behind our eyes and the various ways it classifies itself. You know, when the human beings becomes a more socio-economic creature that is defined by how it is functioning in a system. You know, for me, society is a machine that once I enter this machine, it's as if values of humanhood are simulated. You know, a person's meaning doesn't just come from what is occurring behind their eyes. What is occurring behind their orbiting around what is in front of their eyes. You know, every person has their own unique opening to how their experience is animating thoughts in the moment. Plato said, as above, so below. Realize the above and below are of the same moment. Attributeless, unknown experiencer. I feel we are creatures that can never end because we experience the new. And the equality I'm speaking about in one's inner realms is the ability for their attention where. You know, some people think attention is just an external concept. That your attention is like, you want to go somewhere, your attention goes there and you go there, right? Or let's say you want to punch something, like a punching bag, and so your attention is on the destination, and then your hand kind of moves. You know, you implement the action. But there are ways that attention can move that has nothing to do with your body. You can be as still as a rock in the middle of the most powerful waves and rushes of the river. You can stand as the order and the world can take the place of chaos. You can stand as the chaotic and the world will take the place of order. You know, the mind does some asymmetry to it. If I remember the guy's name correctly, Jacques Lacan. He was this kind of French philosopher, and he said that the most crucial moment in a child's life is the moment when that child looks in the mirror. And when it looks in the mirror, it begins to notice that the dimensions of perception are limited compared to who's handling the perception. So what that means is our reflection in the mirror is like a two-dimensional phenomena, but our awareness to who is looking through the mirror is three-dimensional. So the suggestion of man's mind is that there is a difference our intelligence and the intelligence of other species. When I say other species, that means imagine you began to consider the purpose of the humans in accordance to other species. You look at it and you're like, insects are too small. You know, you look at the trees and you're like, trees can't move, whether I consider them alive or not. You know, and so you come to see other inferior animals like wildlife, and when you see those animals, you see they are bound to their ecosystem. The ecosystem is doing most of the thinking for that creature. And so that is the difference of the human being, that we became aware of where we are and we got out chain, evolutionary wise. So we stepped out of this viciousness of the jungles and that savageness, and we decided to build a world that we trust. Now we have, our ancestors have gone, placing bricks, with their lifetimes. And so it's like this grand structure has been built called humanity. But now I'm seeing those, imagine me and you are in a boat our ancestors made, every person alive now. And so as we're on, excuse me. We are on a boat that many of our ancestors, but not to the complexity of the human being, you know? So to empathize, to consider how another being, it's like this is something fascinating, that the human being is the only, if considered an animal, is the only kind of animal that kills based on ideology. Moves first, or the light, it all kind of outlines the destiny of the civilization. Certain moments of your life you will be pushed in the shadows of experience. Certain moments of your life you will stand in the light of experience. As Sri Ramana Maharshi, a person that goes from the sun into burning sun into the shade and then goes back into the sun, is what he means, that if your intelligence began with the precision of your direct experience, that for a second, as if became your ego, your archetype became a lawyer of your human life, and you looked at yourself and you felt the great judgment was how the whole world was designed. That means before anybody could judge me, the whole world life is a life where for the first time we can influence these conditions. We have consciousness, which means our eyes are open in ways that many creatures on this planet will be open that way. When I wondered about the source of life and I was curious about it, asking people, I suddenly realized it seems the source of life is to find that every person, a lot of people with the sort of subconscious comparative kind of mind, where they're in with how the world sees them and how they see themselves, you know. Sorry guys, I'm just looking for something. Unfortunately, it seems I can't find it. Alright, I'm stalling. Alright, let's go. The human being. We find the most immediate human being we have access to is ourselves. We look at the content of our experience. When we look at life, it's awareness to a sense of self. This sense of self has an objective component and it has a subjective component. The objective self is how your biological survival is a program of its own and must be honored that way. You know, the sort of subjective self is a suggestion. The record button was pressed and the camera began accumulating perception. But it was accumulating perception prior to identity. So what that means is the mind of the child is first trying to copy the world. It's trying to be a duplicate of the world. And after the mind's, the child of the, what am I saying? The mind, the psychology of the child entertains its world as human beings speak to the child, as the child is named, as the intelligence of the universal sector and the civility of man begins to be exposed to the child, as many psychologists say, by the age of, what is it like? And this being here is very actually beautifully overwhelming. That means there have been times where I have kind of had dark nights of the soul, where in those nights I'm ruthless not to the outer but to the inner. There's times I've gotten angry, and instead of kind of like, you know, you see in movies the angry guy around him, I would just instantly, I would just sit down, be still, and behind my minds I was like raging, you know, in my subjective realm, my anger. So it means that during the evolutionary there was a sort of level of intelligent awareness where it was like separate feet. It's as if we were no longer like trees. Yeah, guys, sorry, I don't know why it cuts out. But anyway, the child, in other words, its mind and moment, its mind is being the whole moment, and it extracts, it eyes with a unique, observed kind of movement in its realm. To be honest, knowledge without movement is a photo. And so that's become, if they are not explored through experientially, you know, the best thing that a belief can be is metamorphosis. So when I say equality in the inner realms, I mean right now there is a sort of unconditional ability based on what I've been exposed to. Any child's eyes, that's like the geometrical, you get introduced to geometry, you know, you'll begin to see your mind can fathom it everywhere. Everywhere you see something that resembles a triangle, you're like, yo, triangle. You know, everywhere you see something resembles a square, yo, square. And so it's as if our subconscious has a geometry to it. You know, not just the external. As if the mind does have any relationship with shape. It's kind of like we are a life form. The life is unknown and ambiguous, but the forms are very evident. And so we're wondering, what is this life that is observing the forms? And so there has been many ways this concept has been tackled by people through history. You know, some have concluded that, and so it's one of those things where we are seeing a sort of attention that is witnessing the moment. Ultimately, I feel this attention is attributeless. Our conditioning gives color to who we need to be. So kind of what I'm saying is, in front of your eye, the program; behind your eyes, you are the programmer. You are the programmer of your ideological entity, but it's also your responsibility, your inner realm, if you choose to really function in the outer realm. I feel this is a necessity to be able to see more than your eyes. What do I mean by that? That means, like, I remember many times when I have opened books, or when I'm kind of like looking at new information for the first time, it's as if my mind is acknowledging new shapes. Now, the person's intelligence can choose to relate the new to the past to claim some certainty. But there is also a way where it's as if when you walk in an art gallery, when you walk in a museum, do you stand by one artwork, the first artwork you see, and just remain there? No, you go and explore the whole museum. Right? So there is a strange power in not identifying with something and no longer being subconsciously limited to it. You know, it's like, do we want a moral creature that is moral because there's certain thoughts, certain language has been programmed in its mind? Or do we need a moral creature that is sensitive to the experience? So why is it that we human beings, for example, we see animal cruelty, we're like, that's messed up, you know, somebody stop that. There was a video that years ago I saw, which was it brought tears to my eyes. Pretty much these people, rather than killing an animal, they were salvaging the skin of the animal while the animal was alive. It's as if there's some people who are actually blind, their eyes cannot see, and there are some people who their mind cannot see more than just what they feel is the value. Do you know? The concept of the hero was that in the position of chaos dictating order, order reestablishes itself. You know, you can say every hero in every story was like the same story as white blood cells in your body. You know, you can say those were the first heroes. So in the chat section, Truth Seeker says, what is the topic? The topic is how we interpret the relationship of a way of dividing reality where subjectivity feels like an inner phenomena, but objectivity feels like an outer phenomena. And I've noticed that the relationship a person has with their imagination is another way of saying the relationship they have when in their experience of life they confront the unknown. So all those people who have writer's block, that's where your creativity is, right where that block. Do you know? It's like if you only move through known systems, there is no need for the future. The system is known. It's as if you're part of a, it's like you're born in this life, and imagine everything was done for you. Everything. Imagine everything was done for you. But I feel like if we were in an ultimate position, there would be no climb. And the fact that reality is divided in the way it is shaped the way it is, you know, I thought of Eastern European thinkers. It's kind of, you read history, you're seeing the development of a global brain. I feel civilization is a collective being, which currently is like the intelligence of a child. You know, our civilization is 8-year-old kind of ethos. You know, it has an 8-year-old ethos. It's still fighting over toys. That means the leaders of nations, they, rather than sitting down and thinking about what the potential of the greatest outcome is, it's as if their inner realms speak earlier. They're more convinced by their eyes and the eyes of the other, or rather attempting to create a platform where a new civilization can be brought into manifestation. You know, things come and go out of manifestation all the time. You can think about in every moment of your life where you felt you made a mistake, you knew that right before doing that action there was a freedom. In every moment of your life. This is why subconsciously when someone goes through a kind of chaotic experience, they resort to a sort of victimhood equals 4, you know. But it's more like 2 plus 2 equals 3 plus x, and that x is an unknown, you know. So is an unknown variable. So I kind of see that same x in that mathematical equation, or whatever equation you like. That unknown is the same way of saying what consciousness is, what the soul is. The soul was never a shape. It was never like, you know, they say there's a transmigrating kind of, there is this mentality in Vedic thought and Buddhist thought that we're transmigrating in an illusion, in a hierarchical. Don't worry about, like the Marxists worried about the hierarchical systems in society by concluding man is a social entity. So pretty much justice is and vaster landscape. Do you know, it's as if things that the free will could not define, it ascribed to another will, and many people have their will. You know, some people, it's like you can say there's many ways that people are trying to experience the unknown through. And the whole thing is, it's kind of like I say, it's childish, because even most esoteric societies, they are still caught in ceremony. You know, means is, it's like there's one mentality of spirituality, yeah, go be like secretive and like hidden, you know, but there's one mentality, if it life, this whole world is alive, and when it's alive, that means there's a potential for a communication realm with the outer realm. If you think the outer realm is purely material, sure, you know, you could be choosing to see the sun as your god, you know. Or you can be an atheist eating dinner in a vacuum. So it's there's various ways. There's ways that the mind opens up. You know, I mean, think about it. We have kind of like very firm educational systems, you know? And at the same time, every person's eyes is different. That means there is no way you can put a piece of artwork in front of 8 billion people and expect 8 billion of them to see the same thing. The uniqueness of our inner realms is a disadvantage when it comes to integration, but is an advantage when it comes to innovation. Which really brings the ultimate question: how should the human being live? Under what pretense of an ideological system should the human being live their life? You know, and if you feel you are an ideology, want to go where there's ideology. You know, what you identify with, you go towards automatically. Life is saying, all right, this creature feels like this. All right, go where your feelings are. I noticed that really what in evolving has been a responsibility. Right now, a human being, if we took a time machine and went back, because of our knowledge, because of how we're wings in many sciences and many perspectives, we have a sort of inner response that if we time traveled back, ancestors saw us and wanted to figure us out, they will never comprehend the certain comfort we have with our knowing. Do you know? Many skies can be witnessed in one moment. Many screens can be in one view, realms towards infinity, and has a capacity to justify your outer realms to the void. So one has to be careful that it's like more than life being, okay, should I hold on to these beliefs or should I hold on to those beliefs? More than that, it should be of, okay, I'm a creature of novel experience. The significance of my moment is that I can witness the new. I can be change. Do you know how many creatures on this world are not conscious of how they are changing, but man is? Man looks in the mirror and he does not see a mere body, but who has found his mind. Your mind is your gift. It is the greatest gift. If they say, what is it that if somebody came to me and it's like, what's the greatest thing? I would tell them my wakefulness. For me, my conscious wakefulness is so fascinating. Just noticing how there is before there isn't. When your life begins to see the isn'ts first, like how some things are not possible before they're possible, and he was a psychologist that was not afraid to discover parallels between the ancient and between the modern, or the most time. And so he has this quote where he says, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. How you are alive in this moment, you will go on living in a dualistic program. What that means is, do not seek for heaven, and do not, like, from the heart of, from my heart of hearts, I'm saying this, that there is ways where the world will give you signs. When you do something new, you will even see nature's reaction. I have had some, very, what I would say, divine experiences with nature. Experience was more like finding myself not lost in a forest, but finding myself as an energetic presence present. So really what it means is it is the sensitivity to the makeup of the designs that you entertain as yourself. I find there is great relief in discovering that you're not a thought. Because what does that mean? A thought is thinking it's a thought? A thought? Are we all thoughts that are thinking their thoughts? Like, what is this? Let me tell you what it is. It's an illusion. It is a loop. There's many of them. There's many loops in philosophy. There's many ideology that the person can blindly follow, only to realize that eventually the world is moving beyond that perception. You know? The thing is that I think most people, and I'm gonna, ultimately, it is an impossibility. The point of life is not per se everybody to see the same. The point is efficient vision. You are a vision. in reality. You realize that if what we call efficiency are decision continuity as a conscious being, and there are certain things that do not help your being as intelligence as a thing. That means imagine like instead of people making or to be lists, somebody sitting down and wondering, okay, what are the efficient factors and inefficient factors of my current existence? In your discrimination to notice things, you will eventually see when something becomes important for you, your intelligence amplifies to meet it. So it's like when the question becomes more universal, more strangely, there is more of an effort that arises. You know, this world on some levels, it's like you pressing a piano key, and like that TV show, it's like, what was it, like this Archangel Uriel, this character, this piano key, and it would set into motion, for example, a certain destined outcome. You know, so it's as if we're conscious of our echoes, but we have to also be conscious of the novelty we can bring. It's very fascinating. I concluded it that language is a dualistic technology, hence a paradox is the only way balance can be assured. When I say paradox, that means it's like something is extended and in its extension has an influence, and influence is going to create a countercultural effect of people wondering why is something there. So you can say all human experience comes down to wondering is as it is, you know? His final battle, he's like the main guy in the battle scene, and so as he suddenly, and so he tells one of his assistants or whatever, he's like, go find me the wisest man in the land, you know, and the assistant is like, holy shit, why are you shouting at once? The assistant and this Imperial Warrior finds himself walking in the mountains, and he reaches above of certain clouds and he sees that there's a temple there, you know, and he enters that temple and he goes in kind of pushing the door. Oh, dare this door not open for me before I arrive, you know. And he enters the room and he just like a juggernaut with his imperial honor, like if when you're a warrior defeating undefeated in 70 battles, the king's gonna be like, you're cool, you can be. What happens is he goes in like a juggernaut, you know, like his every stomp kind of like about to break the gentle wooden floor of the Zen temple. He goes in there, he sees the sages, they're in a tea ceremony. That's something they do in Zen. Drink consciously tea and acknowledge the emptiness in the cup. And so what happens is he goes in there and there's this the Zen master is talking to one of his disciples. The guy comes in, warrior, and says, sage, tell me now, what is heaven and hell? He shouts it as if he's commanding him, you know. Follow your desire too intensely, you forget your soul. You know, that's always been also a case. But anyways, so this guy goes in there and he says, sage, tell me now, where's heaven and hell? And the sage looks, and there's this great pause and all the disciples are concerned. It's like, yo, does this guy have, this guy doesn't just have one sword, he has two swords. The disciples are kind of getting alarmed. And the Zen master there is just like fearlessly standing there, you know, very simply, gracefully. And he looks at this warrior, this Imperial Warrior who has been undefeated in 70 battles, you know, And he looks at him and he says, "You are too much of a fool, an animal, for me to tell you. You're too much of a goon." You know, just kind of like a war obsessed machine. And so in that moment, this man, the Imperial Warrior, is as if, how dare you dishonor such greatness? And he grabs his sword, and it's as if, what is this I'm holding? And he puts down the sword, and he bows to the Zen Master, a man who everybody has bowed to for 70 battles. He bows to the Zen Master, and the Zen Master takes a sip from his tea and says, "This." And he suddenly realized it's not, there is no, I don't want to say there's no other dimensions, but it's that the greater dimensions are not conceptual. That's why I've created the term the language threshold. A person can have an experience that cannot be contained in the language of their current historic era. Of course, it's one of those kind of unique wonders, you can say. Some of the stones were found to be the makeup of stones from like miles away. And so just the transportation. Some people believed Merlin built this. Life Gandalf's idol built this, you know. But I always wondered what this was, you know? And something very fascinating I just felt like sharing is that, guys, it felt to me it was a meeting point. You know, not just nature is fascinating, the nature of this is fascinating. The fact that there is inner movement, then arises outer movement. There is internal sort of objective of the subjective landscape. What that means is human beings have lived as objects, and now they have lived as subjects, and now they're moving on beyond their, we're evolving. So what that means is the future languages would probably be experiential oriented, way more experience oriented. Are kind of like a sort of life cycle between individual existence and collective existence. And this is kind of like, you see, it's like the concept of the patriarchy that the feminist movement was inspired by to resist, you know. And it's one of those things where when you look at animals, like, holy shit, animals have hierarchies too. Do you know that means before the scope of human civilization emerged, in nature there were class distinctions, but their actions were based on their ability. For example, you can say birds were of a higher class because it's as if their tactic to their situation could be just to move in three-dimensional space. But many animals that have, say to myself, all right, how does the subjective realm appear today? You know, and as I suddenly pick up the brush and draw something out of nowhere and suddenly realize, whoa, where did this come from? To discover that there is various rhythms that every human being is kind of externalizing throughout the day. All external activity can be seen. I mean, like the typical mainstream view is that it's the particle that has the intelligence. You know, this is why it's easy to be a materialist, because you're considering everything to just be atoms. You know, it's like we're electrons hallucinating humanity. You know, so it becomes very easy when in the simplistic principle of opening up to the idea, you declare that it can be nothing else aside from this. So you see, same thing that the Inquisition did, that it was like Galileo, Copernicus. These people kind of struggled with these situations where the people felt that the earth was the center of everything. And so it's as if we claimed ownership of empty space only through a sort of subjective proof. And so what happened is, as objective truths managed to entertain, this is why when I think about Galileo, when I think about Copernicus, when I think about these who began figuring out how the external landscape truly was in position, it's like what they realize is that the mass ideology is one where in order to have agreement, you have to have static components. That means it's like, if I can't, it becomes very hard to speak about changing all the time. You know, like imagine if the ground underneath you just changed in form all the time. You would suddenly see it's like you can't still if the ground is shaking. So that's something important to consider. Up in any thought, justifications are allowed to emerge in any moment. I found that rather than making it a sort of analytical, intellectual kind of on paper of imagination, I began to kind of see, all right, so it's more like us being astronauts that have gone onto a new planet and are exploring this, rather than us kind of sitting down somewhere and conceptualizing. You see, it's like the evolution of the outer realm highly depends on the evolution of the inner realm. As a human being cannot see yourself in certain ways, you cannot have certainty in those ways. So what that means is a lot of external survival has to do with observance, action, observance, acceptance, action. I think if life does not have a mysterious angle to it, we won't care. I feel a utopia is the definition. I feel comfort is necessary, but is not the only necessity. I feel that language is a dome on our species, and really the mind has been limited to it. I feel the only thing we have, if we treat this rock in the middle of nowhere as a sort of island where our species only has itself, and of course all the other species, but at the same time we have to conclude, it's like, what is the action? What do, if you took eight people and put them in a room, what would they do? And so you see, you begin building in within the space granted by the existential position, but then you reach the walls of the room. And then philosophers and poets and mystics arise to kind of, intellectuals arise, scholars, to kind of wonder if there are doors. There are doors to the limits of our perception. And that's the thing that the educational system is missing. Not it's as if the child may hear something and doubt it, but it can't deny it, because if it denies it, it can't progress to the next stage. So it becomes a very kind of tricky conditional route. So the educational system is not educating people, it is them. Because you got to ask yourself, is nowadays in 2020, how many organizations are seriously, truly doing it for the sake of the education? If it was for the sake of education, if we had Mother Teresa running if we had Dalai Lama level kind of compassion running the educational system, then the priorities and be different. But because the whole system is entangled in a sort of economical blueprint, it's like I feel what's going to happen is like there's going to be a marriage between the economical system and educational system in the way that schools are going to become employers, and at the same time, how would I say it? Businesses will become educational. So I think what that means is an experience is worth having if you learn something more about it, because a lot of the labor jobs that people do, I get it, you're humble, you do hard work, and that's great. That really is a beautiful way to maintain your inner life, by being simple sometimes. But I realize that if we do not have the potential for the complexity, then it's as if we're missing out. you know so it's as if the guy is negotiating with the other so that the other could see themselves in a different self. So so what that means is that kid should play. It should be the responsibility of the whole room to play. It should be the responsibility of the whole civilization to bring out the greatest potential vision that harbors behind the minds of every human being. It doesn't matter if it's a child in a country where there's poverty, or if it's a child that's blessed by born in the greatest palace. Their vision is new to everyone else. So what I mean by that is, like, if we had a sort of consideration that it's an opportunity to be alive, we would just make the experience of the opportunity efficient, rather than identifying in solid kind of groups holding flags and then fighting over resources. It's like, what is this? It's like if the inner realm was simpler, the outer relationship would be simpler. And I think this is why you see in history, like in shows that they may kind of make fun of it, that it's like next level kind of polymaths in history, or like these like status quo, when they're wondering about beyond it. It's like where your attention goes, you animate in accordance to what's present in the content of your moment. To be an ideological creature means you're class attention to things. That means when your attention looks at this object, you feel bottle. When you look at that object, you see, okay, computer screen. So it's like the language has a relationship with how the attention upon the object evokes it, or is it. In the sense, it's crucial. Pretty much that's the kind of intention behind this talk. Pretty much, it's I think an incredible thing to wonder about. How would an individually conscious, objective being live beyond thought, live beyond its own generation, its own into the subjective realm? Because I'm telling you, I can sit down and move my subjective realms, or when my subjective realms are moving, I pay attention to it and I just communicate. You see, it's like just because the person entertains thoughts doesn't mean the person is a thought. Imagine somebody came up to you for the first time and said, "Hey man, who are you?" And imagine you said a sentence as a response. And then now that person, I feel this is kind of what happens from the transformation of full vision into a mature vision. Experience justifies more of the subjective. There comes more contentment and life sensitivity to witnessing it. And I caught on to this, guys, because I realized I try to be convinced those older than me, any person to wonder, those older than you have been exposed to existence more. What that means is when an idea emerges in their mind, they have had access to more experience, data. Do you know? So this is it's as if you must not just respect elders just for their physical capacity, but for their minds. Their minds has endured. You know, it's like in I remember in certain esoteric kind of circles, there's this idea of like the old soul and the young soul. So think of it this way: old people are like old souls. You know, that means they're old enough. Anyways, guys, with us experiencing ourselves as a field of intelligence where we're not just localized to a certain subjective blue outline, Iron Man suit. And so at the same time, it's kind of like there comes an elegance. This is those people who understand rhetoric speech. What that means is language, or their intelligence accepts the language that has been being their mind, but also has a know that acceptance is now no longer ideologically oriented, it's experiential. So think of it this: the more acquainted you become with the objective realm, the more aware you are of what is subjective. And to be honest, I didn't have enough room to write the subtitle fully, but it was something like, you know, shift behavior. The more a person can see, they will, more you see means you enter a room and your subjective realm has more color. There is more architecture in your subjective landscape. Now, some rooms, some moments in your life, the subjective realm, the inner realm, the attention could be not even wanting to administer itself as a thought. That moment where you're in bed early in the morning, kind of under your blanket, it's like, what? It's like, are you thinking then? Are you lost in deep thought? No, you're just in your objective self purely. So it's kind of like maintaining and being able to pilot through an experience being an object in emptiness, then piloting through an ability to be a subject through emptiness, and then piloting to an awareness that is the witness of the subjective objective, but as a position. Honestly, if I was at the Stonehenge, I think I would go sit at the center of all these and just sit there and wonder why. Why man's experiential reality centers him in the